Welcome everyone. So we are on day 2 of concept-based curriculum and instruction. And we are going to be talking just about some additional concepts, going a little bit deeper into some things that will be helpful for you as you're working on writing. So we're going to start today with 2 questions, and if you've noticed throughout the training, we've done a lot of asking of questions, and we're doing that in part because we're modeling what concept-based curriculum and instruction would look like for students. You ask questions, they're invitations in. So what is a key takeaway from the first day of training? And for those of you who are able to do the homework, what's something that tied into the training from the homework that you were doing? So I'll give you a moment to think about any key takeaway from the first day. And obviously there are wrong answers here. Go for it.
Well, the generalization, which is at the top, is overarching. It's supposed to be a concept-based, and it's an action statement. It ties in everything that unit or whatever it is that you're teaching is going to encompass.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Any other key takeaways? Go for it.
The idea of the concepts that it should be diversified enough that it could be used in multiple settings, and try to create things that are going to tie into other units that might see in other classes.
Absolutely. Both of you, absolutely. Any other thoughts from that first day you want to hold on to?
It's supposed to tie into a portion of a graduate, correct?
Correct.
That's the part that I don't know how to do.
So we're going to do a little bit of that today, and I think I'm sort of jumping ahead, but Harold and I are going to be around to help you as you write, so sort of on consult, if you will, and so some of those questions, as you're figuring out how to do some of this, may not actually be clear until you start actually doing your writing. You might not even know exactly what to ask until you're writing, so we're going to be around to support you with that. But I will show a little bit of that today. Yeah, go for us.
I had kind of a question, and excuse me if it was covered in the first presentation because the audio was a little kind of in and out on that. But there's the structure of knowledge and then there's the structure of process. Would it be appropriate for like an intro class to be heavy on structure of knowledge and then more advanced classes to be heavy on structure of process? Would that?
If it helps you conceptualize things that way, sure. I mean, and it just depends on your subject area, right? Like in English, structure of process is really heavy throughout every single course. Art is the same way. If you're saying that by the end of your courses it's more process driven, then if you think in your head, you probably are more process driven as a subject area. You're going to use both, so you're going to have facts and knowledge, but you may have to rely on that underlying structure early on a little bit more because kids don't have enough knowledge, background, understanding, concepts to even go to the further processes. That's where they're gaining their skills and strategies to be able to go to the next piece. So there will be some variation. Any thoughts about how the work tied into the homework? Well, listening to some lovely music. It's like a Jeopardy theme song. All right, I'm gonna let you think about the homework because we are gonna come back to it. So when I'm gonna be walking around at one point, you can kind of think about how did what you do for homework tie into all the things you've just said, right? Like the concepts to transfer, to lead with that. So the samples that you have, thinking about how that ties in. So today we're going to really just focus on 3 things, so it's actually going to be a little bit less of me talking, and that's why I'm saying there's going to be more work time. So the first question is, how do we scaffold understanding? So if you remember back from the last lesson, we talked about how sometimes you have a verb that's not really strong. The connections you were talking about, just not quite there. So guilt affects perception. What are guilt and perception in terms of concept-based curriculum and instruction?
Concepts.
Yeah, absolutely. But is affect a really strong way to combine them? No, it's kind of what we call a weak way of combining. So, but here's the thing, students are going to eventually write their own enduring understandings. So if you remember back from the first day, I said we write them in curriculum to help guide us, but the end goal with all these questions is for students to take these concepts and put them together into their own thinking. It's a way for them to show you how they understand what you're trying to teach comes together. Students will write this. You will probably write this. I can't tell you the number of times I've written generalizations like this and then go, okay, how do I revise it? Like, that's part of the process. It's not uncommon to start with something like that and then think about, okay, how can I make this better? So when you do that, in this particular case, well, how does it affect perception? And if you look at this level 2, guilt narrows and intensifies focus and shapes perception. So now we've added concepts, but we've now got 2 verbs. It narrows and intensifies. So we're sort of saying how it does it. In the world of curriculum writing, you're writing to this level 2. So that's what you're aiming for in your curriculum. So again, don't be surprised if you start with the effects or the level 1. It happens to all of us because you're just trying to get your thinking and you have to stop yourself from not writing it down. Write it down. We can always ask yourself how, then you can refine it. But when you're thinking about a classroom, you have students, all of you know these students. They get to guilt narrows and intensifies focus and shapes perception on the first try. How do we get them to go even deeper? Well, the next question we ask is, so what? Why does that matter? Perception can cause people to make poor choices and decisions. So by our very questioning, we can ask kids to go deeper. There will also be students, you know them, I know them, that getting to level 1 is going to be difficult. And we have to let them get there and stay there for a little while, and then we keep pushing them to how. We push them to the next level. Well, again, when we write curriculum, we write it to level 2, and we can help us differentiate up and down using the how or so what kinds of questions. I'm going to give you another example. All cultures have celebrations. Again, that has, that affects, it's a weak verb. You know, that intensity is not there. But there are 2 concepts. So again, so instead of asking how, the question would be why. So those how and why questions. Celebrations express traditions of a culture. Why is that stronger?
Defines.
Good word.
It makes a relationship.
It makes the relationship clear.
It answers the why.
It answers the why. So it makes the relationship clear. These celebrations express the tradition. So in that writing, and again, you're aiming for level 2. Everybody, trust me, I'm going to say it again and again. Everybody writes level 1 generalizations when they're starting. Even I, when Harold and I were trying to come up with some examples, we're like, okay, we're just getting our ideas out. It's always going to happen. You just have to ask yourself the how and the why questions to help you get to the next one. And then, you've got a kid. Okay, so what? What is the significance? Go deeper for me. And again, traditions help to unify a people. Now, somebody might disagree. I have the English teacher brain in my head. Traditions help to unify people. You could write a whole paper about that, right? You don't necessarily have to ask kids to write a paper about that, right? But like if you think about when you get to that higher level, that could be a little controversial. There could be different opinions about it. Probably at level 2, you're not arguing, but you can see how it can go across multiple cultures in time and space. I'm going to give you one more example. So again, impact, we try to avoid the word impact because we always want to ask, well, how? How does it impact? Why does it impact? I'll let you read that one. I see some people still reading. Notice the word which can strengthen. So if you remember back to the other day, we said, you might need to use may or can or might. There's sometimes not absolutes. Oftentimes, most of the time, many times, this statement can be true. But there are times when it might not be. Now again, you want to push a student a little bit more. So what? Why is that significant? Why is it important to have a strong economy? And here's one possible answer. And again, controversial. Maybe not everyone agrees. And you can kind of have some interesting debates. In the next slide, I'm actually going to give you some time to work and to look at what you wrote and to look at your own curriculum. So before I do that, are there any general questions about what I just showed you? Okay. You might have them as you look at your documents. Okay, so review what we discussed. I will share the slide deck with you so you have those samples. And then look at your homework, revise, or if you didn't get a chance to do anything yet, that's fine. This is a time to look at it. If you're still at the place where you need to kind of search for some things that might relate, but what I want you to do is take a look at what were the generalizations that you wrote as part of your homework. Where do you think those generalizations are living? Are they living in the 2, the 1, the 3? If you wrote them in the 3, awesome. You might want to take it down a notch because, again, you've gone to a level that you wouldn't necessarily write your curriculum to. I wouldn't get rid of them. I'd just maybe make a note. You can add it to your curriculum document, like level 3 generalization. And you can leave it there as a sample for your colleagues. Because if you think about the curriculum document as a tool for somebody who's just walking into your subject area for the first time, to kind of know, okay, what am I supposed to be teaching? It will never hurt to have a sample level 1 or a sample level 3 in your document to help a teacher. And say, you could put it under, a differentiation kind of section, like, hey, a kid who might start out, this is a sample of what a kid in level 1 might come up with, or an initial idea, here's a sample of level 3. Thumbs up, thumbs down, I'm gonna use that little method in the middle, okay, fair?
In the middle.
In the middle, that's fair, it's fair. Okay, so I'm gonna come around and meet in groups with you. Before I do that, I'm just gonna share the folder with you so you can see it. Okay. All right, hi everyone, thank you. I'm gonna pull us back together. We've talked about a lot of different things. I think a lot of you, you had a lot of level 2, you had some level 1, but you were starting to think about, oh, what other verb could I use? And in one of the groups, the conversation was like, oh, wait, we could go to synonym. And someone reminded me about the depth of knowledge chart in terms of verbs. So we have some lists of like strong verbs, and I will put those into the folder for you. And absolutely with the synonym, sometimes you just can't find the right word. And you Google, okay, other ways to say this, because it's just not coming to you. And that's totally normal in the curriculum writing process. And you know what? It's also a tool we can teach our students to use, right? I'm trying to come up with a verb and I can't think of it, but this is the idea I want. We do this in the real world, why wouldn't we let students? I will make sure that I put it into the folder for you. So we are actually going to switch a little bit of gears and we look at something called, what is the conceptual lens? Okay, so the question I'm going to ask you, I'm going to show you a series of pictures. I'm going to ask you to tell me, what do you see? So in this first picture, what do you see?
Smiles.
Smile. What else do you see?
Family.
Family.
Happy
Oh,
family.
family. I'm sorry.
Happy family.
Happy family. I don't know if I could. Smiles, happy family, family. Did I miss anything?
Asian.
Asian, sure. Okay, so let's take a look at the next one. What do you see there?
Water.
Water.
Beautiful landscape.
Different landscape.
Forest.
Trees.
Mountains, forests, trees.
That's really blue.
It's really blue.
Paradise?
Paradise.
Surrealistic.
Realistic, moving nice.
Tranquility.
Tranquility, yeah. I look at that and go, can I please be hiking there?
Summer vacation.
Summer vacation, yes. I think we're all minds. On these first two,
Ms. Osborne, please call 3307.
so in the first one, a lot of you came right away to some similar ideas, right? You talked about family, went right there. The second one, we've actually had a pretty large range in terms of what people saw. Let's just take a look at this last one. What do you see?
Panda bears.
Panda bears?
Nourishment.
Nature.
Nourishment, nature,
Cuddling.
cuddling,
Snow.
snow.
Yeah, I think snow.
Partners.
Wait, I'm sorry, what did you say?
Partners.
Partners, yeah.
Twins.
China.
Oh, yeah.
China, sure. Is there, when we're doing this, I say, what do you see, right? There's a whole wealth of ideas. And if you sort of went into your curriculum and said, what do you see in that way? Think about all the different things your students could bring to it, all which would be awesome, but you're never going to be able to teach all of that in the course of half a year or a full year. So what we do to help us and to kind of give us focus is we give a conceptual lens. So if I tell you the conceptual lens for all of these pictures is harmony, or if I tell you the conceptual lens for all of these pictures is nature, it just refines your thinking. It gets you started down the path. This is where we're going in this course. And we do write those and we do post them and we do give focus to the work for our students. I'm going to give you some other examples. So if the unit topic is the national media, okay, that's our topic. If I give a lens of credibility, what does that make you think of? I use that lens.
Is what
Fake
they're saying
news.
true?
Is what they're saying true? Fake news?
Yeah, reliability of sources.
Reliability of sources?
Multiple things.
Analyze everything you hear,
And analyze
everything you hear.
everything you hear?
I wasn't for all, I was thinking like along the lines of critical thinking, like, you know, be able to compare and contrast and be like, hey, this is believable and this one's not.
Yeah. What if I change it to persuasive force? What does that make you think of? And same topic, national media.
The immediate bias that a group might have.
Bias the group might have,
How they can influence your thinking?
how they can influence your thinking.
The word choice used and how it affects, yeah.
Word choice, use, how it affects.
Yeah, but spin on stories.
Spin on stories. Just by changing that lens, think about how, I mean, they're similar up top, they're similar things, but actually the very focus is a little bit different just by changing the conceptual lens. So when you're writing, just gonna think about what is the lens or the focus. You may not get to this right away, like it may not be the first step you do in writing, but as you're working, okay, really where is our focus here? This is just so, it just helps you integrate, and it also helps you know what not to teach. So if your conceptual lens is credibility, you may make different choices than if your conceptual lens is persuasive force. And the other unit, the other example that I showed you, if your conceptual lens is like relationship. So I'll take this back for a second. If I, instead of harmony or nature, say I said relationship, that's a very different focus for the unit than say harmony is. If I said independence or interdependence, or if I said point of view, those are all going to take you down a different path for your unit. And so you really have to think about what's the path I want to be on. I think, you know, Casey and Ross, that's part of what you're working with your course. What's that lens? What's that focus? What's going to help us hone in on what is important in each piece? You know, that's what you're grappling with. I think it's a click. So here's some other samples. So you have, you know, if you need some ideas, here's a list of them. One of the other ones I was thinking of is, could be safety perhaps for our first unit in some of your classes. That could be the conceptual lens because we don't want anyone to get hurt using any kinds of tools. But those are just some ideas. And to give you an idea. And again, they're written into your units. Anyone have any questions on that? The other question that was asked of me is, are we going to sort of look at some samples of what the template would look like? Yes, we are working as a curriculum team on the template. I'm going to show you some of the samples. We have just this last question to go through. And then I will start showing you some of the samples, some of the examples that we have. We're not quite refined yet with our template, but it's coming soon. I think really, hopefully by the end of next week, do you think, Dr. Gator, will have something, a template?
Definitely.
Yeah, because we're meeting again on Tuesday.
I'm hoping mid-year, mid-year, good, midweek. But also, what we're trying to, we had our secretaries in on this conversation also so that we get our template, you know, we're trying to make it available. So, you know, you'll just have to download it and enter stuff in.
Thank you.
So this is a new curriculum template that the district's using, starting with this writing session.
Yeah, here, you know what, I'll interrupt our regularly scheduled programming to show you this piece first. This is just reference, so
We're
just
trying
because.
to bring some coherence and consistency across the disciplines, you know, so, this conversation will be happening in other departments as well.
Is there a due date that you have for us for working on this curriculum this summer?
Well, the answer is maybe.
Okay, I just want to meet the deadline.
Because here's the thing, you know, some of this is funded through Perkins, and you know, the Perkins deadline is June 20th. And I did get permission, and not 20th, 30th. I did get permission from Pam Mangini for us to submit hours that we believe, you know, work will be done. And as long as I get those into her, you know, we can use the Perkins money. But I also put in money for after July 1st as well. So, you know, it's gonna be, you know, we'll sit and talk individually about what you think your schedule will look like and decide what we're gonna put in. But I do need to, that's why I brought some today, because, you know, our grants administrator's getting a little nervous when he sees money sitting there, because we have to return it back to the state, and they don't, they do everything possible not to return money back to the state. And so, that's what we're working on. But everybody understands, and it's not just in, this department. You know, teachers have been very engaged in doing a lot of different things this year, and it's been difficult, for people to, you know, break away and think about writing curriculum. So there are a number of departments who are in the, you know, in the same timeline we're in.
What I've just shared with you, again, is reference only. We did an audit of what our current curriculums look like in terms of what are the components that are in a broad range of curriculum documents. And what you see is like the component and then the commonality and then some notes. So when you look at the X's and the O's, the X means it's our department, the O is that it was a sample from another district. You can see the kinds of things that we already all had in our curriculum. And so we're just trying to pull that together into one format that everyone's using, rather than having all these different ones, especially since you can see, like, many of these were already in all of our curricula. I think that you were using a lot of the curriculum documents that have been written more recently, were written using the concept-based curriculum template, because that's the one that we came back from the training with. So I have seen some of your documents. A lot of them were already written using this format, the concept-based curriculum instruction format. Some of the older ones obviously were not, or some of the newer courses that haven't yet been written obviously were not. But these are, and like I said, we'll go maybe about a half hour, so we'll get to that next piece after this part.
And I think the important thing that you put out is that you and Harold are gonna be working with the small groups for writing. So, you know, you're gonna have a resource as a support.
So you've heard me talk about questions, that the questions are for the kids, they're inviting and learning, and they're posted and shared. So this is a sample, like, so if you think about this slide, and I know these examples are from ELA, but, you know, if I say the topic is conflicting characters and I post on the board, you're gonna understand the theme, you're gonna list down symbols, you're gonna define a text, identify a theme, and define communication. That's not particularly exciting. It doesn't invite students to say, hey, I wanna think about that. There's nothing like, okay, all right, you're gonna tell me what the definition is. So we don't do that. What we do instead is say, why is theme essential? What is it? What is communication? Now I've got your brain going to think about, well, what is the answer to that question? And that's why we're writing questions for kids. So when you're thinking about these questions that you ask as part of your curriculum, think about questions that are going to be in kid-friendly language. You may not achieve that every single time. Sometimes you have to modify a little bit, but that's your goal, to try to get something that it's going to draw students in. So I'll give you another example. This is from social studies. Again, you know, they may be interesting, but if you just put it out there as a list of facts, it's not as inviting in. But how are nations formed? I mean, that's a really cool question. If you really think about that. What is communication? You know, and has a student ever really thought about, well, what does that really mean? And why do nations have symbols? And what is a nation? Like, I want to be in that class. Because that's gonna make me think about like these big topics that maybe I haven't actually thought about before. We have 3 types of questions. The highest level, if you will, are those provocative ones. What are the most effective ways to convey point of view? So I could ask everyone in this room, and every single one of us would probably have a different opinion about that. And then we could debate it, we could argue it, you could write an essay, you can do whatever on that. You're probably only going to have maybe one of those in each of your, 1 or 2 in your units. You're not going to have a ton of those. You're really living in the conceptual. We're all talking readers use inference to determine perspective and author's worldview. And some of you have asked me about the relationship between the enduring understanding and the questions. So, because some of you said, well, I wrote a question first. Yes, sure. And then write the enduring understanding. Or write the enduring understanding and then write the question. There is going to be a relationship between those 2, all right, at the conceptual level. And then some of you asked me about the facts, the content. That's the bottom one. What elements can determine validity of reasoning? You need to have factual questions, because if not, what are students grabbing onto in order to make those larger conclusions? So what are the factual questions? What are the key terms, key knowledge that students have to have in order to be able to do some of the other things? The number of those will vary, just depending on the unit. Russ, thinking back to your question, maybe you're going to have more factual than conceptual in that first unit, and as the units go on and the kids actually have enough knowledge to do the work, then you're going to have more conceptual than factual. And again, those are going to go back and forth, but they are the key questions, and when you think about those questions as you're writing, they are what you post for students. You give these to kids. You don't want a million questions. There will always be sub-questions underneath, and as you're teaching, you might ask kids those sub-questions. But in the curriculum writing, you're really thinking about what are those key questions, just like you're really thinking about what are those key enduring understandings and concepts. Because if you end up with a laundry list of everything, you can't teach it. You feel like, oh my gosh, I have to keep pace, I have to keep pace. And concept-based curriculum instruction is anything if not pacing. It's not about pacing, it's about conceptual knowledge. It's about being able to transfer. So you don't want to put so much into your documents that you have no time for students to draw their own conclusions and to answer those questions. If you think about the conceptual question and the provocative question you ask at the beginning of the unit, when you ask students to write their own conclusion, to write their own enduring understanding, that's the generalizations that you put in. You take the concepts, the list of concepts, okay, how do those tie together? How do they help us answer this question? See some of you nodding. As you're writing, you're going to have more questions, but this is the overview of how to do it. And again, you have this for reference. The other piece that's often asked is, how does this tie into performance tasks or assessment, whatever? It's just about the most important understandings and knowledge. So they're evidence of mastery. But sometimes the answer to the question, and however they do that can be the assessment. And because they have to explain their thinking, and they could do it in a lot of ways, or they could answer the question by designing that game. Like, the game itself becomes the answer to the question. And they're not just sort of simple activities. You might have a simple activity, that you have to have kids do to kind of get the basics down, but a performance is like, okay, this is how we're showing you that we really know. And baking, they put together the product, right? You make the cookies that come out because you've actually leveled and put in the proper measurements. And your cookies look like they're supposed to. You don't do that. In my house, we have a joke about, this is a true story. I wasn't paying any attention to what I was doing, and I clearly did not have conceptual understanding at the time, because I managed to make a banana bread with no flour. And no gluten-free flour, none of that. Clearly, I did not have conceptual understanding at the time, because all I had was oily mush. It was disgusting. Now, did I learn from that? Yes, I did. And do I now have conceptual understanding of the role of flour in baking? Sure. That was through trial and error. So I would have failed my first performance task gloriously. It also stank of our house, okay? But that's just an example.
So might you pose something less as a question and more as a do something that, does this, and this? Would it be more of like a direction for this performance task rather than a question?
It could be, but the performance tasks are typically tied to your overarching question. So then, what you're talking about is directions to get there.
Well, I guess my question is, I think we have the question, the curriculum that guides, but the student-facing part of it might be, do this.
Sure.
Create something that shows me that you know how to do this.
Yeah, and I guess I would just say to put the question at the top so that the student knows that this is what this performance task is trying to help them answer. Yeah, because you have, you have to give directions and say,
Right.
how to go.
And the reason I ask that is because a lot of the kids can do things, but they can't really necessarily verbalize how they do things. Like if I gave a student a written test about something, they might get a 30 on it, but then you ask them to do that and they knock it out of the park.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. The actual doing of it is the performance.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so this is the question you were all asking me earlier. How does it tie into the templates? I'm going to give you the other template that we're looking at. I also on here, just so you have it in one place, because I try to put things in one place, this is the link to the state website, which has like all of your standards referenced in it. So if you're like, where are all my standards or where can I find that? I just tried to put it on here for you. Because again, I don't know, I like going to like one place for everything. And then thinking about how does the information in your templates tie in. So that's kind of where we are right now. I am going to tie into portrait, but before I do that, I want to kind of talk a little bit about these templates. So I'm going to have to.
Oh, I remember this.
So this again, I'm just giving you for reference of this.
Reference only.
All right, well, because this is, so what the state has put out is a universal curriculum template. And, we're looking at this along with that other document that I showed you, and merging those to create what is Stratford's template. And if you take a look, so the first page in this course curriculum template is just the overview. It's the summary page, if you will. What's the name of your course, what's your content area, the grade level or levels, in your case for some of your courses, what's kind of a general course description. And in my mind, don't make it more complicated. You have a course description in the program of studies. You can just transfer that over. One of the things that we're talking about, what does aligned core resources mean? That's something that I think is part of Tuesday's discussion, because I'm not even 100% sure what they're referencing from the state here. So again, we're looking a little bit at some of this. What are some big ideas addressed in the course? That's some of what they're talking about. And habits of mind, transferable skills, that's one place where, say, our portrait could go, right? Because if you think about those are, collaborator, communicator, those are some big ideas. So that is one place there. So that's just, you do that once for your whole unit, or for your whole course. On the next 2 pages are, again, I don't know that we're necessarily doing every single part of this, but it's the sample of where we are in process of the unit. So you start with sort of your standards, and that's part of the reason why I pulled that up here. If you look underneath, it's transfer goals. So again, you're thinking about our concepts, the things we're talking about here. What do you want conceptually students to transfer? We're not, again, we're having a discussion. What do we mean by coherence? We may not even leave that in the final document. But if you look below, what are the essential questions? What are the enduring understandings? These are the things we've been talking about. What will students know? What will students do? Here, they call it demonstrations of learning. That's the same thing as the performance tasks, formative assessments, summative assessments. All of those are demonstrations of learning. So they're just kind of calling, that's, so I don't know, some of you are writing it down. So like, the performance tasks, formative assessments, summative assessments, those are all demonstrations of learning. Again, you can take a look at sort of that vocabulary, that terminology, and some of those may just be your concepts. What materials, and then some of these other components. And again, we haven't finalized everything here. Back on our document, some of the things we had was sample lesson activities. We also had some differentiation. Again, we also had the conceptual lens. So I do think that that's going to go into this format. You're going to see that on here. But you can see how what we're doing, there's some tie-in between what we've been doing before this and also what the state is putting out as a sample.
So is this gonna wind up with the, kind of like that pyramid structure? Is it gonna wind up like what we did, not today, but the last time where we had the concepts and the topics and the facts, and is this going to kind of morph into that shape, or are we gonna morph that into this?
I think you're more morphing that into this. I think the kinds of boxes are going to be here, so you're going to take those ideas and kind of put them into the different boxes.
Okay.
That's where we are right now. But again, we've been having some different conversations, and we have another one on Tuesday. So it could change a little bit based on that conversation. We're just sort of all looking at this more deeply because this is actually a relatively new format from the state, and we're just kind of trying to see, okay, we know we're all doing this. What's in here that we want to hold on to that maybe we've not been doing? We're also talking about, when we talk about resources, like a curriculum's never written to a book. So if you put a book in here, it's, what if that book goes out of date? What if that book, your curricula should in many ways be, it's outside of the book. It could be, you could plug in something different and you could still teach your course. But maybe there are a list of key books or key resources that you're giving students. You're going to want to put that here and get that approved because every single student is using these key resources. Sometimes with Untitled, they have an online resource. Well, we have to also go through the online approval policy. So some of those components in terms of what we're going to put in for resources, that's some of the conversation that we're having in terms of what should go in here and what may need to go through a different process. But the general rule of thumb is if there's something that you're expecting to give to every single student, you're requiring every student to do it, to use that resource, you're going to want to put it in the curriculum document for board approval. If it's something that's more of a general resource that maybe some kids look at and others. So then the other piece of this, excuse me, is the portrait piece. And I'm giving you this, but again, don't get nervous by this. There's just, the goal for this is to help you as you write. And I'm also going to show you what our thinking is in terms of where this would go in a curriculum document. So the way this is written is that as you're writing a curriculum, you can be referencing this, and you are 100% never going to put all of these skills and competencies into any one course. So let me start by saying that no one course could ever do all of this. So if you're looking at this going, oh my goodness, how could we do this in every course each time? No. There's going to be some courses that reflect the portrait in certain competencies and areas more than others. That's just reality. When you're thinking about this curriculum template that I just showed you, if you think about essential questions, enduring understandings, and demonstrations of learning, next to your essential question or your enduring understanding, you might put this essential question ties to collaborator, reflective, and flexible thinking. And so just in parentheses after your enduring understanding or your essential question, you'll put the competency from portrait. And then maybe you're also going to do, I don't know, solution-driven problem solver, and you're gonna put creative expression next to a different enduring understanding. And by the end, when you get to the demonstration of learning, both of those are gonna be in the demonstration of learning as well, because you've put them in your essential question and your enduring understanding. Notice I picked like 2. I mean, there might be more, obviously, but you cannot say that your course is gonna focus on every single one of these. And I also would think that even if you say, like, solution-driven problem solver, I'm using that as an example because we were talking about problem solving earlier. There's like 4 components that are outlined for problem solving in this document and in the portrait. You may not do every single one of those components in every unit or for every essential question or for every demonstration of learning, which is why I'm saying, like, you might not want to put solution-driven problem solving, like the whole thing. You might want to narrow it to, like, okay, leadership. This here is, we're going to focus on leadership. This is connected to that. Oh, but really this one is critical and analytical thinking. You may also find that some of these are repeated more than once in your units and in your courses. And that's okay too. And some of them are not in your courses. That is okay too. Because there may be other areas where kids are gaining these skills, and it's just not the focus of what you're doing. That, you know, what we're going to look at eventually is making sure that there's nothing that's not covered somewhere. But, you know, that's not your responsibility to cover every single thing in this portrait. Yeah, go for
I'm
it.
sorry, did you say the sub-skills from the portrait document are going into enduring understanding section on the unit development?
Yeah, enduring understanding, essential question, and demonstrations of learning. Those are the 3 places we're looking to have them tied. And again, this may change a little bit. You're kind of getting the preview and the thinking right now. So when Harold and I meet with you in your groups, we'll make sure you know. So wherever it's going to go, that's what we're thinking right now. But if that changes, you'll see it in the curriculum document because we're going to note it in some way. And you know what, Ross, you actually just made me realize I kind of misspoke. I don't want you to put the sub-skills in. They're so tiny. I actually mean the indicator and the competency. So you made me realize that I was saying that too fine-grained a level. You're really just looking at the competency, which would be like solution-driven problem solver, and the indicator, which is, say, creative expression. The bullets are here because they are defined in our portrait. They're to help you understand what we mean by creative expression or critical and analytical thinking, but you don't want to put all those tiny little bullets in your curriculum document.
So you just put an indicator.
Yeah, the indicator and the competency. The competency is one of those big 5 ones: collaborator, communicator, solution-driven problem solver, lifelong learner.
Okay.
Does that
Keeps it
clarify?
shorter, yeah.
Yeah. I was realizing, like, oh no, I don't mean sub-skill. I'm saying it, I'm like, oh my goodness, no, I misspoke. That's not right.
Well, because that's how I asked the question.
Yeah, no, but I said it that way, so it's good that you asked it that way because that made sure I don't want to send people, I don't want to stress anyone out. And again, so this is this slide, I just explained all that to you. The other thing you have in your folder, and again, you don't need this right now, it's an audit, so you can kind of look at the tie-in for a department, but that's something that is past this work, so, you know, I'm just putting it there for you to see. We have about 10 minutes, so I can answer any questions. You know, this is, you know, the reminders to keep track of your hours, the reminder that obviously we're going to be working with you and coaching you. And then, you know, really thinking about which courses are you focusing on first. Dr. Gaeta has good timing because I think those will be some of the questions in terms of your plan for curriculum writing that you'll be working out with her. We mentioned this book last time, and unfortunately this book has not come in. The other one has come in. So these should not be sitting in my office or in the curriculum instruction. So I want to make sure, I think I have enough to give everybody one, but I clearly only have one of this version. So we're going to, Harold mentioned Joanna has a way to raffle this off, if you will. It is May 26th, correct? So I guess, does anyone have a birthday in the month of May? Oh, no. I do. Thank you. Happy birthday. You got that version. Eventually, hopefully, everyone's going to also get that one, I just don't have them all for you. So this is kind of like how to teach it. It is really the next step. The intro, I think I even have them. You know, I think it gives you some ideas, it gives you some format, but the reason we didn't give it out initially is because it might seem a little bit overwhelming as you're trying to write. It is definitely the next steps. It is what does it look like in the classroom. So it's you know, it's for you to use and as you need. But again, I don't want it to become overwhelming to you. But there also could be some examples and some samples that can help you as you're writing and give you ideas.